Hey, dollar scholars, what if everything you thought you knew about money is wrong? All right, real talk. If you had to buy something 5,000 years ago, how would you do it? Would you swipe your Visa? Venmo a caveman? Or trade your neighbor 2 goats for a sack of grain? If you picked goats, congratulations. You've been lied to. Yeah, I know. That whole bartering was the original currency thing? It's not entirely true, but don't worry, it's not your fault. Schools have been feeding us the same outdated money stories for years. So today, we're diving into the hidden truths of money, debunking myths, exposing forgotten financial scams, and figuring out how we went from gold and silver to numbers on a screen that somehow still have value. Buckle up, because this is going to get weird. Here's something to think about. You've probably used money at least 10 times today. Even if you didn't buy anything, your rent, your bills, your crippling student loans, they all revolve around this thing we call money. But here's the million-dollar question. Do we even know what money is? Because if you dig into history, you'll find that money is actually just a glorified trust exercise. And some of the biggest changes in how we use it, they weren't planned. They were manipulated. Let's start with a huge misconception they probably taught you in school. Textbooks will tell you that before money, people bartered. You know, like, I'll trade you 2 chickens for a sack of potatoes. I'll trade you a cow for that fine-looking wife of yours, grain. But historians and anthropologists, they say it's not that simple. See, while barter did happen, especially between strangers or in times of crisis, no major ancient society actually ran entirely on a barter system. Instead, most economies worked on credit and record-keeping. Take ancient Mesopotamia, home of the Sumerians and Babylonians, some of the first real cities in history. Instead of hauling goats and sacks of barley around, they used IOUs and ledgers to keep track of debts. And how did they do it? Cuneiform tablets. Yep, these ancient people didn't just invent writing, they used it to create some of the first financial records ever. Temples and palaces acted like giant banks, keeping track of who owed what. Scribes chiseled loans, wages, and transactions onto clay tablets. Basically, the world's first spreadsheets. These records weren't just for kings and priests. Merchants, farmers, and laborers had debts recorded too. But here's the thing, not every single transaction made it onto a clay tablet. In daily life, people relied on trust and informal agreements, much like running a tab at a bar today. So if you were an ancient Sumerian and needed some barley, instead of handing over 2 goats, you'd say, "Put it on my tab." And just like today, if you forgot to pay, the collectors came knocking, except instead of emails, they probably showed up with a spear. All right, time for a little money heist. By the 17th century, European rulers had figured out how to game the system, and it led to one of the wildest financial crises ever. It was called the Kipper and Whipper crisis. Here's the scam. Local governments melted down gold and silver coins, mixed in cheaper metals, and used these weaker coins to pay off debts. Sound familiar? Yeah, inflation has been around for centuries. Eventually, people caught on. The whole system collapsed. And the economy? Absolutely wrecked. Lesson? Governments have been manipulating money for centuries, and speaking of scams, let's talk about coin clipping. See, back in the day, people would shave tiny bits off gold and silver coins, melt them down, and make new coins. Boom. Instant profit. And the best part? It was practically undetectable. That is, until people stopped trusting the money. So, to fix this mess, governments added ridged edges to coins, the same ridges you see today. Yup, those ridges? They exist because of medieval money hackers, but the story doesn't stop there. Gold and silver? Too heavy. Too inconvenient. Society started experimenting with something even more radical. Paper money. And the craziest part? People hated it. Like full-on angry Yelp review levels of outrage. 1 star. This paper money is fake. Will not be using again. When China first introduced government-issued banknotes, people weren't sold on the idea. But eventually, paper money caught on. And then in 1971, President Nixon decided, you know what? Let's just ditch gold entirely. So now, all money is fiat, which is just a fancy way of saying it's worth something because we all pretend it's worth something. All right, so here's the deal. We've gone from trading shells to gold, from gold to paper, and now from paper to what? Numbers on a screen? Crypto? AI-generated money? But here's what's wild. Every time money changes, it's because people stopped trusting the old system. And when trust disappears, so does the value of money. Let's take a quick trip through history and see what happens when money just stops working. Germany, 1923, hyperinflation gone wild. Imagine waking up and seeing prices double overnight. A loaf of bread, millions of marks. By the time you hauled a wheelbarrow of cash to the store, it wasn't enough to buy a sandwich. And that's assuming your wheelbarrow didn't get stolen, because honestly, it was worth more than the money inside it. People stopped trusting the German mark completely, and when trust disappeared, so did its value. Zimbabwe, 2008, the $1 trillion bill. The government printed so much money that inflation hit 89.7 sextillion%. Yeah, sextillion. They literally had to print $100 trillion bills. And guess what? That still wasn't enough to buy lunch. Eventually, people said, forget this, and started using US dollars instead. Venezuela, 2019, Bitcoin to the rescue? The local currency became worthless. So what did people do? They started buying food with Bitcoin. Because when your money doesn't work, you'll find something that does. See the pattern? When people lose trust in money, they move on to something else. And now, we're at another turning point. The old system? Government-controlled money. The new system? Digital currencies. But the real question is, who's going to control them? Imagine if the US dollar went fully digital. No paper, no coins, just numbers in a government-run app. Sounds convenient, right? Until your account gets temporarily suspended because you bought one too many iced lattes this month. Or you could go decentralized. Bitcoin, crypto. No single government controls it, no one can print more of it. No inflation, no banks taking a cut. But will governments allow a financial system they can't control? The last shift from gold to paper to fiat was about power. This next shift from fiat to digital could be the biggest battle over money in history. Governments want control. People want freedom. So what happens next? Who wins? And more importantly, who loses? Every form of money in history has failed at some point. So what do you think will replace today's money when it's no longer trusted? Bitcoin? Gold? Or are we just going to start trading Starbucks gift cards and rare Pokemon cards? Comment below. Let's see who gets it right. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button if you learned something new, and please subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the weird world of finance.